Hi, and welcome to Freedom Fighters Code Gray. This is a show where we discuss human trafficking, an issue that's taking place all around the world and in our backyard. Some of the content in today's show may be triggering for viewers, as we will be dealing with subject matter that's related to exploitation and trauma. For information and support related to human trafficking in Canada, you can call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-833-900-1010. How do we stop exploitation before it starts? Why should we prioritize prevention? And what does empathy have to do with it? Well, today I'm joined by Guido Hajenius, the co-director of programs at iEmpathize, who will be addressing these questions. Thank you so much for joining me today, Guido. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be a part and participate.
Well, just to start our conversation off today, I would love to hear about your journey to getting involved in anti-trafficking work. Can you share a bit about that for our viewers?
Sure. Yeah. A friend of mine who actually started iEmpathize way back in 2009 really started sharing just the information and the stories about human trafficking. It's really the first time I think I heard about human trafficking. And so that immediately impacted me, in many different ways. Just the fact that this is happening, and it's not just happening around the world, but it was happening, in many communities in the United States. And so I think from that point, I wanted to do something. I didn't really know what I would do, just because when I first learned about human trafficking, it's just very overwhelming. It's such a very big problem. There's a lot of different parts to it. And and I think from there, I wanted to do something. And so I just really started sharing some of the training programs that we first had with iEmpathize in Los Angeles at the time. And I think the big thing for me was, I definitely felt heartbroken. And, the more I specifically heard stories of this happening, to oftentimes kids being trafficked. And, that in itself, impacted me in a deep way. And then I think the second part was, I've always wanted to make a difference, and so it was just, taking that first step, use what I have, and just beginning to find a way that I can help make a difference. And so I think, it was those. So it just, the more I was participating, the more it just really grew on me in terms of a passion, knowing that I could be a part and making a difference with this.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And you mentioned that, it was your friend who was involved in iEmpathize. So what exactly is iEmpathize? What does your organization do? And how did it start? Where did this journey to, preventing exploitation come from?
Sure. Yeah. So iEmpathize, we're a nonprofit organization, and we focus on equipping adults, empowering youth to prevent child exploitation and human trafficking from happening. So we have always been working in the prevention, helping to prevent this problem from happening. We address all forms of exploitation, and seeing exploitation kind of the umbrella, and there's many different forms of exploitation, including human trafficking. And so for us, we have, we first started working in different parts of the world, and then really landed, working mostly in the United States. And for us, it's really about, learn more about it, the Intersect Response platform. I would say that is, in essence, what iEmpathize is, meaning that we have built materials, training materials, all media-based, turnkey, you can access online, easy to use, that is targeted in the specific areas where exploitation happens the most. And we build these materials, and then we find partners to, have that be distributed in those particular spaces. And so really the idea is that, if you are in, let's say, a hotel space and exploitation happens to intersect in that space, then how can we best provide tools, education, guidance to that person that works in the hotel to help address the issue in that particular space. They don't need to go to another space to fight this issue, but they can literally be in that space. And the same thing I would say from a parent, right? And informing, educating their kids online of what happens and how exploitation can also happen there as well. So it's our Intersect Response platform. That's what it is. It's a platform for the community to respond. We develop media-based training materials, and then we distribute it. It is, when finding partnerships to distribute it as broad as possible.
You mentioned that prevention education is a focus of iEmpathize. And so why do you and your organization feel that prevention education is key to really addressing the issue of human trafficking?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because there's different ways different ways to address this problem, from intervention to prosecution, to serving those who've been trafficked, victims of trafficking. And I think from the get-go, we really focused on prevention because we saw this as a way to address it in kind of long term. The way we see it is that I think prevention education is in everything, right? Like if you think of just as simple as health, it's like nobody wants to go to the doctor. Nobody wants to go to the mechanic. So there are factors that can be, that are preventative so that this problem, doesn't really be, that something doesn't really become a problem. And I think when it comes to human trafficking, there is there's factors that cause this to happen and to be ongoing, right? Like a cycle. And so for us, I think prevention just has an impact in many different ways, but most importantly, it's getting to the source. It's identifying what are those factors that cause youth to simply be vulnerable, and also, how to, educate and inform those where exploitation happens the most, a level of advocacy that, where more and more people get involved to help make a difference. And another thing I think is important is, if you would talk with people that have been trafficked and ask them, is there anything that would help prevent this? Maybe not 100%, but in some ways that possibly could have made a difference. And oftentimes you're going to get different responses, but oftentimes you'll hear something as, yes, is if a family member intervened, if I learned about this, if, because, oftentimes, not all the time, a person that is being trafficked, they don't even know they're being trafficked. So the more there's ways that, we can intervene, before this even happens, or even as it's beginning to happen, I think it will make a difference. So
those points that you shared are so important for people to understand, that many of the people who are experiencing exploitation aren't aware that it's happening. So to be able to equip educators, parents, people in different sectors of society with this knowledge to help detect and respond to the issue is so critical. You mentioned that, prevention education can make an impact. And I'm wondering if you have a story that you could share of how some of the prevention education efforts that you have been involved in has made a difference in an individual's life.
Yes, I have many stories. So for the sake of the show, we did a training a while ago, and we have our Power Youth program, and then we also use that to train parents. And we have a Spanish adaptation, and we use that to do this Spanish-speaking training for parents. One parent went, it was in Los Angeles, and she was just impacted, like just the fact this exists. And empathy was also a part of that in terms of your approach. And then she went home and looked in her daughter's closet, who's 15 at the time, and noticed all these clothes that she did not buy, and they were expensive clothes, and noticed a couple other things, other red flags. Approaches the daughter, and she did it with empathy. She came to ask questions and understand and work to relate. And the daughter thankfully opened up. She, that could have been a completely different response, but the daughter opened up, and the daughter ended up getting out of that situation, and adapting back in school. And so it was just incredible. It was incredible, just in terms of how the mom approached the daughter in that process as well.
Thank you for sharing that story, Guido. And just, wow, I'm really moved that the tools that were provided in that training session, that mom knew how to approach, like you mentioned, the empathy approach, which I know we're going to discuss a little bit more about, but the questions to ask and how to respond, right? Because I think that's a key thing that people are wrestling with, caregivers. If this was to happen to my child, what do I do? How do I respond? How do I relate? And how do I ensure that the conversation is open and ongoing so that we can be a safe and supportive place to offer resources and exit strategies? Well, Guido, the work that you and your team is doing is absolutely invaluable, and I'm really looking forward to discussing this more. But we're going to watch a short video that has been produced by iEmpathize that really kind of highlights the trainings that they offer and how you can access them. And then we're going to continue this discussion after we take a short break.
My name is Elena, and I'm a mom. I want to tell you about youth exploitation. Every day, vulnerable youth are being exploited and trafficked, and every day you intersect with these youth. At your workplace, in your social space, and even in your home and neighborhood. Human trafficking, an extreme form of exploitation, is the second largest criminal industry in the world, with more than 40 million victims. It can be hard to know how to scratch the surface of this issue, but you can make a difference, a powerful difference, right where you are. Introducing the Intersect Response Platform, equipping adults to recognize and respond to exploitation and human trafficking. By signing up on Intersect, you will be shown how to fight youth exploitation within your unique context. For example, police officers will be given tools specifically designed for law enforcement. Teachers will be given educational tools designed for middle and high school students. Social workers will be given tools and strategies that they can share with their clients. Parents, first responders, medical workers, hotel workers, faith leaders, all spaces that intersect with youth exploitation. The curriculum includes top-notch short documentaries, training videos, expert interviews, survivor stories, illustrated scenarios, interactive questions, activities, application response plans. Intersect emphasizes a victim-centered, empathetic approach that identifies possible indicators of exploitation, external factors that can make youth more vulnerable, solutions for how to prevent, report, and end exploitation. Join Intersect at iEmpathize.org and be equipped to fight human exploitation.
What kind of show do you want to see on Rogers TV? What interests you? Log on to rogerstv.com, fill out a show proposal, and tell us about your segment idea. We want to know what you want to see. Rogers TV, only on Rogers.
The greatest women's mixed martial artist of all time. She is just next level.
Double jumping, baby!
Orene Aldana!
Her boxing is crisp and clean. This is a big-time challenge to Amanda's title.
I'm chasing the bell, LB champion.
So much anticipation for this fight. The winner of this fight would be next in line for the title.
The UFC has landed in Vancouver.
Let's go!
Hi, and welcome back to Freedom Fighters Code Gray, a show where we discuss human trafficking. In today's episode, I am joined by Guido, who is the co-director of programs at iEmpathize, and we are discussing the importance of prevention education, stopping exploitation before it even begins. And so, Guido, earlier in our conversation, you were mentioning about how your organization provides training and resources for specific sectors of society or niche areas. Why do you focus on areas such as hotels, and what impact are you seeing that have on people and the individuals who attend those sessions?
One of the things, like I would say one of our big case studies from the beginning, we had provided training materials for the trucking industry for many years. And we just saw this incredible response in terms of, in that case, truckers, and it just started expanding to oil boom communities, that people going to the training, watching it, being impacted in such a way that they make calls. They make calls to the a national trafficking hotline number. So from there, we started in one area, one sector, that would be trucking, transportation in general, and then we realized, like, okay, we can do this in multiple areas. And then the other side of this is just this idea that there's people already working in these particular spaces, and it happens to intersect with exploitation and exploitation with youth. And so if we can just best build materials for people in those particular areas to best understand what human trafficking, how it shows up, and what are those response protocols, that's where we saw that this can make a big difference. And also, especially with youth serving spaces, I think that was definitely a flagship program of ours, because in multiple spaces where exploitation happens, there's always a youth involved. I guess not always, but we knew that was a very, very strategic focus as well. And so instead of working with youth, teaching youth directly, why not work with those, provide the materials to those who work with youth and have the relationship? So
I love that. I think that is so strategic, as you said, finding the groups of folks in society who already have that relationship with the individuals who may be at risk or possibly in a situation of exploitation, to provide them with the resources, information, and support that they need. Do you have an example of one specific area or sector that you have seen prevention education influence in terms of really equipping people to identify and respond to potential situations of trafficking?
One of our partners, his name is Matt Driscoll. He's with Las Vegas Fire. He learned about iEmpathize. He learned about human trafficking at an event. Actually, it was like a church retreat, and he just felt like, I need to do something about this in Vegas. And so we said, okay, well, let's partner together and do an event. This is what we do. So in 2018 in Las Vegas, we put on like this incredible opportunity of just training using our apathy effect exhibit, which is an education exhibit. And because he's a firefighter, we were able to train close to 1,000 firefighters from all the different areas. And right away, there was a firefighter that recognized a person. I forgot the specific situation of how they came across that person, but it turned out to be a victim of human trafficking, and they knew what to do. And we also partnered with Local Survivor, human trafficking statewide task coordinator in Vegas as well, to help develop these trainings. So, but just to see the response and then other firefighters hearing about that, it was just incredible, just to see the outcome. And then we knew, like, hey, this works, right? Now the goal is, how can we just continue to introduce this to as many firefighters as we can, So that was very inspiring.
That is an inspiring story. You think about our first responders, and, they're showing up at different scenes on a daily basis, and how many times they might be intersecting with someone who is experiencing exploitation. So equipping them with the knowledge that they need to be able to respond to not only the emergency situation that they're being called to, but potentially this other emergency that might be hidden, so to speak, if they're not aware of all the signs, so that they can provide, resources, support, ask questions with empathy. And so I want to spend some time talking about this word empathy. Why have you decided to include empathy as a focus of your approach to prevention?
There's a difference between empathy and sympathy. A simple way of how sympathy is, someone feels bad for someone else, feels bad for the suffering of someone else, but it's limiting. Because by having sympathy, you might not enter into that person's situation. You might not take the time and do something to support the person, although you feel bad. And so that's good. That's better than apathy. And so empathy, I would say the difference is that when you're relating to someone else's suffering and pain, even though you yourself have not experienced that exact same pain, but you're still relating to them. And from that point, you are responding with a way to make a difference, to support. And I also see empathy as really about connection too. So I can look into someone else's life and have my own preconceived ideas of what I think is going to help them, right? Versus identifying where they are, what they're going through the best way I can, and figuring out how I can connect with them, right? So from there, I think as it relates to exploitation and a problem like, someone being trafficked, this is in our media, this is in our training. It's something that guides us because we see how empathy is a solution to end exploitation. And the reason being is because to me, it's what we want to do is if we can inspire empathy, or let's say an empathetic response in multiple spaces, then we kind of see this idea that many people are entering in to make a difference. It could be the parent that is educated and knows how to love better, support better, connect better with their kids. And if it comes to that, intervene, right? It's the firefighter, it's the person, it's the nurse, let's say just the spaces where exploitation is happening, right? But even beyond that, where it's someone that introduces us to a teacher to use the program. And so we see this, I always say that we develop great programs, but our programs are really built on the partnerships. It's the people from the community that care enough, right? And that means that they're going to do something, whether it's introduce us to someone where we can use those materials. So for us, empathy leads to the solution, but even more so, I think it really is a solution because it allows many people in many different ways to enter in the issue. Because what happens is if someone learns about human trafficking, it's overwhelming. They might still not understand it. There's just different reactions that people can have, right? But it's what I find is that if they can figure out, what, I want to play a part. I want to do something, right? Maybe I'm not, going to do something big or, develop my own nonprofit. That's okay. But if you can find a way to enter in and do something, and, to me, that I think is going to make a big difference. And that's where it's the human element, right? Where trafficking itself is so dehumanizing. To me, empathy is that key human element that I really see make a difference.
You mentioned how partnerships are really vital for your organization to be able to share this information, this training that you've created, this empathetic approach to preventing education. Like these partnerships are really important. And as you mentioned, the issue can be overwhelming. It's so big. It's the second fastest growing crime in the world, that was highlighted in the video that you shared. And so, when we see the magnitude of what's happening, collaboration is so key. We need to work together in order to prevent, to stop, and to support those who are exiting situations of exploitation. Folks in Canada might be tuning in going, yes, I work in a hospital and we need resources for folks who are in this space, or someone might be a first responder, or, someone tuning in might be an educator, or, working in a hotel. There's all these different areas. And so what would you say to someone in Canada who's listening to you share about these great resources that you have available with your organization that's based in the US? How could they partner with you? What does that look like for your team, and how could they reach reach out to you or your organization to find a way forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the reason I think it's a good question is because I think about how another important part of how we have built the Intersect Response platform, how we build our trainings, that we're keeping in mind, other than language differences, there are cultural differences, yes, but we always want to keep in mind, how can we expand? How can we duplicate this, right? And so, because we have these different trainings, what I would say for people in Canada, yes, I would love for our trainings to be used in multiple areas that we have targeted. And we're working on some new trainings as well. So what I have seen is partnerships, like I said, is key. It's people that care enough, that want to help get our materials into the schools where youth are, and then also into those other spaces where exploitation happens the most. We build the materials, they're free, they're accessible. So that's where it's set up for us to build key partnerships in communities so that we can drill down those materials and reach more people with the content and education. And most of this is on our website as well. So iEmpathize.org, and it's that simple. So
that's amazing. Thank you, Guido. With the remaining time that we have left, I feel like, this conversation has been so helpful, so informative. Is there anything else that you would like to add that you feel is important for our viewers to know about your organization, the work that you do, or how even human trafficking is happening in their community?
I think one thing that I would share is just a simple story. It was a health educator that I partnered with for many years in Long Beach. She shares a story of how one of her students came back 5 years later, and the teacher or the educator didn't even recognize, then doesn't remember, because, it's a lot of kids that she teaches. The kid came back and says, I'm only thanking two, because these are the two people who made the most difference. It was the teacher, and it was his grandmother. And he had just received a full ride to UCLA, and all the friends he was with in 7th grade during that time in that classroom, they all went south, meaning that they just went a different path. And so he just came back, and the key thing he said is, like, because I felt like you cared. You weren't just teaching, but you actually asked me these questions to understand what is going on in my life, and that impacted me. And I just thought to myself, how empathy, it's long lasting, right? We don't realize that the more we can do to make a difference, and have that empathetic response and take action and partner, we just don't realize the long lasting impact that we can make. And so I hope to have conversations and new connections with many, many people in Canada of how we can work together and make a difference as it relates to this issue.
Well, thank you, Guido, so much for taking the time to share the invaluable work that you and your team are undertaking. I appreciate your efforts so much. If you are tuning into our program today and you're in a situation of immediate danger, please call 911. If you're looking for information and support related to human trafficking, you can call the Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-833-900-1010. Thank you so much for joining us today on Freedom Fighters Code Gray, and we hope that you tune in next time.